All right, everyone. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to CSR Marketplace Virtual 2026. And today's session, How to Prove the Value of Employee Volunteering on Wellbeing and Retention, sponsored by YourCause from Blackbaud. My name is Katie Stearns. I'm the Vice President of Membership and Partnerships at ACCP, and I'm glad you're here. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to listen in on this important topic. If you don't know ACCP, we are the premier membership association for corporate social impact practitioners, and all of our programs, including this week's CSR Marketplace Virtual, are designed to advance our mission by sharing knowledge, fostering solutions, and cultivating a community of peers. So we are glad that you are part of that community today. This is one of 8 sessions that ACCP is hosting as part of this year's CSR Marketplace Virtual. You can see the others on your screen. Registration remains open for tomorrow's sessions. So if you see something that catches your eye, I hope you will join us. We're actually recording all of the sessions, and we will be posting those to ACCP's website next week. And then they'll be available for your viewing pleasure through the end of the calendar year. Before we get started, I want to highlight some other upcoming ACCP programs. If you happen to be based in Chicago like me, there is still time to join us for the in-person CSR Exchange event happening next Tuesday, June 23rd. That's just one of the local events that we'll be hosting for the rest of the year. We will also be in Seattle, Philadelphia, LA, New York, DC, Minneapolis, and we would love for you to join us. On July 9th, members are invited to join us for a virtual topical member discussion, which will be an insider sneak peek of the findings from our CSR Insights survey. And then on July 15th, members and non-members alike are welcome to join us for a webcast with the full release of those results from the annual CSR Insights survey. If you're curious what ACCP membership is all about, we're offering a deep dive into membership benefits on July 16th. And then finally, you do not want to miss the ACCP conference. It is the event of the year for corporate social impact practitioners. We'll be in Boston in September this year, and early registration for that with the best pricing ends next Friday, June 26th. There's lots more detail about these events and many more on our website at accp.org. All right, just a few quick Zoom logistics. We have turned on closed captioning and live transcript today, so if you'd like to see the transcript, you can navigate down to the CC icon in your Zoom window and click that caret to select full transcript. We also encourage you to interact with our speaker and each other by using the Zoom chat. And then finally, we want to hear your questions throughout today's presentation. We'll be saving some dedicated time at the end for Q&A. So please use that Q&A feature to drop in anything you're wondering about that we can come back to when we get to Q&A. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Kate Campbell, who is the Senior Team Lead Customer Success Corporate Impact at Blackbaud. Kate, I'm turning it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join today. I'm Kate Campbell, a senior team lead of enterprise customer success at YourCause Blackbaud. Before I introduce myself further, let's set the tone for today's session. In my role, what I consistently see across organizations is the belief that volunteering is strong. You guys know that it's valuable. But when it comes to proving that value internally, especially to executive leadership, that's where things can start to feel a little bit more challenging. So today, we're going to focus on how to bridge that gap, how to move from reporting activity to actually demonstrating impact in a way that leaderships understand and trust. So as we get settled in, I would love to get to know a little bit more about who is in the room today. So take your time, but drop in the chat your name, your role, and your favorite way or place to volunteer. And as you are working on that, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I've spent the last several years partnering with enterprise organizations to design and scale volunteering and corporate impact programs. Most importantly, I help connect those programs back to real business outcomes like engagement, well-being, and retention. I lead a team that supports a portfolio of enterprise clients, so I get to see firsthand where organizations are succeeding and where they're struggling to prove value of this work internally. I am based in Boise, Idaho. My favorite way to volunteer is typically outdoors. I enjoy planting trees, cleaning parks, working on urban farms, activities like that. Additionally, a cause that is near and dear to my heart and drives a lot of the work that I do is maternal health. And we've got some intros in the chat. We have some folks from across the board. So I love seeing that. We've got some folks out of Chicago. I see Florida. I'm seeing some friendly faces. I'm also seeing some new faces. So thank you so much for being here with us today, and keep those intros coming. Fabulous. Let's get a sense of what we're going to be talking about today. First, we're going to start with level setting on why volunteering matters to workforce outcomes. From there, we'll spend a little bit of time on a simple framework, the proof ladder, that will help you in shifting your mindset to connecting participation to real business outcomes. Then we'll look at how partnering with HR using a tool called a measurement map can help you in tying your program data to metrics that your leadership already trusts. We'll then wrap with how to communicate that value in a way that resonates with leaders. And of course, at the end, I'll leave you with a few practical next steps. So before we dive in, I would love to hear again in the chat, what is one thing that your team reports on today when it pertains to employee engagement, specifically volunteerism? Take a minute, drop that in the chat, and we'll just kind of use that context as we go. For example, you may look specifically at number of hours. Maybe you're less concerned about number of hours and you're more concerned about how many people from your current organization are actually engaging. It'll be interesting to see what is kind of driving your current reporting today. Okay, so we cannot start without grounding ourselves in something important, which is the why. The connection between volunteering and workforce outcomes is already well established. This isn't new, and it's something that most of us know and have seen firsthand in our roles for quite some time. Research reinforces this. For example, a 2024 Deloitte survey found that 87% of employees say volunteer opportunities influence their decision to stay or join an organization. From an engagement perspective, Gallup tells us employees are more likely to stay engaged when they feel that their company gives them something meaningful to contribute to. Volunteering creates connection and purpose, which drives engagement and ultimately supports retention and performance outcomes. The challenge isn't typically proving that it works. It's proving it inside of your organization in a way that your leadership understands, trusts, and really wants to champion. That's exactly what we're going to focus on next, how to take something we already know works and translate it into something that's measurable and actionable. All right. So the proof ladder. We're grounded in volunteering matters. So the question now becomes, how do we actually prove that impact? And the proof ladder is my simple framework for shifting your mindset from activity readouts. Hey, we accomplished this many hours this year. We had this many people engaged this year, to what that volunteering activity actually changes for your business overall. Most organizations spend the majority of their time reporting activity. That is important, don't get me wrong, but it's not what leadership makes decisions based on. Leaders make decisions based on outcomes and business impact. So your goal should always be to connect what you're already tracking to the signals that they already care about. So we love a visual. We love a metaphor. We're going to think of this as a ladder. So you start with activity. How many hours? How many people engaged? How often did they engage? And that influences those employees' experiences. And then we move to the impact of those experience within workforce signals, things like retention or intent to stay, which ultimately then connects to business outcomes. This is a simple framework, but hopefully this visual, anytime you're heading in to a strategic brainstorming session or thoughtful, time with your team to say, hey, how do we want to move forward on this reporting? Just think of this beautiful ladder, and hopefully that will set the tone for how you proceed. So let's break it down further. I have created a slide here for you all to kind of show this framework breakdown. It's a progression, if you will. So we start with activity. And really, the question that you're asking yourself in this moment is what happened? So your participation data, such as your number of hours or your events. This is your foundation, right? It doesn't prove impact on its own, but you have to have it to move forward. We then move to experience. What did employees feel or gain from the volunteering activity that they did? Did they feel connected? Did they find meaning in that moment? This is your bridge between participation and impact. Transactional experiences typically lead to low impact on employee experience, while meaningful experiences unlock engagement and therefore downstream outcomes on your business. We then move to workforce signals. What changed in the behavior or sentiment? This level helps you consider if volunteering influenced how employees feel about their work and or their company. We want to think things like engagement, belonging, intent to stay. My company cares about X, Y, Z. And it's a critical level because this is where you can really start to look at layering in HR metrics that are already being tracked and typically already have a good level of trust around them related to leadership. And finally, you have the business outcomes. What did it impact at an organizational level? Examples include impact on retention, attrition, and performance that are positive or maybe sometimes negative that can help you shift your strategy. Your goal is not just to claim causation, but to demonstrate directional impact as much as possible, because that is what leaders care about and how they make decisions. So for example, you say things like employee who volunteer regularly show higher retention rates, or teams with higher participation show stronger engagement and lower attrition trends. And even better, here's the data to back it up. The power of this framework, it's not in any one level. It's more about the connection between all of the levels and how it helps you in shifting your mindset towards connecting activity to outcomes. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a quick poll. Where would you say you are right now within your organization when it comes to connecting your volunteer data to outcomes? So our first answer is report participation only. Second is we layer in engagement signals. Third is we connect to workforce HR outcomes. Or fourth, we're trying to figure this out, which no shame. If you're trying to figure it out, that's totally fine. Hopefully that's one of the reasons that you're here today, is to get a great starting point. So I'll give everybody a second. And while we do that, I'm going to go ahead and just look in the chat. Seems like we have some folks who look at giving, volunteerism, an average for both of those by employee population and donor. That's an awesome start. Number of hours volunteered, percentage of employees that have volunteered at that business unit. So we've got some great starts here. Let's see our poll results. We have 42% who report participation only. That is our largest majority there. So I'm glad you guys are here today, hoping that you can walk away with some really applicable next steps. We then have 29% of you who are layering in engagement signals. So you have got the participation activity readout down, but you're also layering in some engagement signals, how employees are feeling and connecting with these events. And then we have no one who is connecting to workforce HR outcomes. So that's really great for me because I think the next handful of slides that we move through will hopefully get your gears turning in that direction. And then lastly, tied with answer B is we're trying to figure it out. So 29% of you said we're not sure. So also you've come to the right place. Thank you so much for level setting. That's really helpful to kind of understand where everyone is currently sitting at this moment. All right, let's dig in. All righty, so we are going to now shift into where we go from here. This is where partnering with HR becomes essential. So you've done your brainstorming in terms of using your proof ladder to say, okay, this is where we fall on the ladder and we want to move one rung up on the ladder, right? And a big part of that, once you've collected your participation data, you have your activity readouts. Secondarily, you may or may not be living on that second rung, which is layering in those, experience components, but moving to that third rung, that place in the poll where the audience here said, hey, none of us are doing this. We're not able to really thread those business outcomes in. The big component of this is partnering with HR. It's essential. The data that you need, engagement, belonging, retention, it usually isn't owned within CSR. Instead, you need to partner with your HR team to essentially avoid building something new, but also connecting your volunteer data back to metrics that are already being tracked and leadership already trusts those methods is a huge piece of this, right? So you want to start small. You're going to focus on one priority outcome, whether that's engagement, retention, belonging. You're going to anchor that trusted metric that you know leadership already believes in, and really it's engagement surveys. This isn't the only way, but engagement surveys are typically something that your HR team is already using, they're already managing, and they have that data. It's about connecting it across your work and theirs to be able to pull outcomes out that your leadership will be motivated to hear more about. So we want to start small. You guys are busy. I am certain your HR teams are also very busy. So you want to start small and build over time. You may currently have relationships with HR. You might not. So that might be your first piece, right? We need to connect with someone in HR that can actually help us get on the right path. Once you know what that looks like for you, we're going to want to put into practice a simple measurement approach that's going to support you in this partnership in taking volunteer data and turning it into credible insights. Okay, measurement mapping. And it wouldn't be a measurement map without some fun emojis to visually pull us through the activity. So you can use measurement mapping as a brainstorming and planning exercise within your team prior to engaging with HR. Or maybe you already have a very solid relationship with someone across the aisle in HR that you can do this activity with as well. But it's a great way to essentially kick off this portion of reporting. So first things first, you're going to start with an outcome that you want to influence. You're going to ask yourself, what business priority are we solving for? This might be retention, might be engagement, it might be belonging. It may be driven by an inkling. I have a suspicion that our team volunteering initiatives are really fruitful for making people feel engaged. I would like for that to be the outcome that we want to influence or we want to learn more about. You're then going to anchor it to metric that leadership already trusts. So something like an engagement survey or maybe an intent to stay score. This is what will make your insights credible. And this is really where that HR partnership is going to be super important. HR is going to maybe give you some ideas of additional ways outside of engagement surveys that they might be tracking and keeping a pulse on some of these insights. From there, you'll bring in your volunteering data. What behaviors can you actually measure? That could be your participation, it could be frequency, or the type of activity itself. This is where you're going to bring the data to the table and meet HR in the middle. You're then going to define your segment. Who are you comparing? Volunteers versus non-volunteers, new hires, specific business units. This one may tie back to your original kind of intent on outcome. Maybe you kind of are anecdotally seeing that folks who are new hires are having really positive employee volunteering experiences for team volunteer events, and you're getting really nice survey feedback from your Engage post-event surveys. And you kind of just have a knowing, right, that it's maybe a really, really positive strategy. So this is important to kind of say, what are the specific segments that we want to focus on? From there, you can layer in insight. And I kind of already spoke to this one, but this is where you're looking at stories, qualitative proof. What did employees actually experience? What are you hearing through your own feedback loops, whether that's official post-event surveys? Maybe you have a general CSR inbox where employees are writing you to tell you how awesome an event was, or maybe they're sharing feedback on how something could be better. This is kind of where you're really going to lean into your knowing. You're going to lean into your expertise and what you're hearing from the ground in terms of employee volunteerism. And then finally, you're going to tie it to your next action with HR. How are you going to test? How are you going to validate? And how are you going to scale in that partnership with them? This will create a clear line of sight from behavior to workforce outcomes to a decision that you can actually act upon. So it wouldn't be a webinar if I didn't have an example. You can get as detailed or not detailed as you want in this. For the sake of this webinar, I wanted to keep it light so that we didn't completely blow you up with text on a slide. But this is a simple example of connecting volunteering to retention. So the example itself is a CSR team wants to understand whether volunteering influences retention. They're maybe hearing some feedback through the feedback loops that, volunteering is really a big component of why employees want to stay at the company. They focus on the intent to stay and test whether repeat volunteers show stronger retention signals overall. So you'll see in the chart to the right, you have your outcome that you are looking to test or learn more about. And that is, for this specific example, retention. They decide to leverage the intent to stay question within the engagement survey data. That question is the I see myself here in 2 years question, or 5 years, or whatever that specifically looks like for your company. They then decide to compare repeat volunteers against non-volunteers because you're really wanting to test, hey, if someone shows up once a quarter within a year to volunteer, are they more likely to stay with the company or at least have the intention to stay with the company for longer? So essentially that overall insight that you're testing is repeat volunteers show higher intent to stay. This is gold. If you go to leadership and you have this insight, it's been tested and proven, and you have the data to back it up. Think of the just wealth of information and maybe even funding resources and additional decisions and support from leadership that can come behind this kind of finding. So they have employee feedback, right? Remember the insight, the story component. It's not necessarily mandatory, but it definitely helps, right? We love quantitative data, we love that, but you can't remove the heart from this, right? We're in CSR. It's an important component of what we do. And this is how you then are able to say, all right, HR, how do we validate this trend across teams and expand repeat opportunities if we do end up finding that this has a real business outcome and measurable impact on retention, retention moves for our team. So people are volunteering. We're moving from people are volunteering to here's how volunteering influences retention, and this is what we want to do about it. So you've moved through all of this, and now that you know what you're going to do about it, you need to have leadership buy in. It's time to present. All right. So communicating to leadership. When you are communicating value to leadership, the goal is to position volunteering as a lever for talent and business outcomes. So how do you do that? Leaders do not always respond to just activity or data alone. I would say 9 times out of 10, it's not motivating enough for them to make decisions on. So you want to be sure to include insights that are tied to metrics that they already trust, engagement survey results specifically, make clear connections to business priorities like retention, and present actionable recommendations. So you want to avoid general statements. I've included one here. We had a 45% participation rate last year and 12,000 volunteer hours. That's great. It's not a bad piece of data to share, but it leaves your leadership then saying, okay, so what? Is that good? Is that bad? Is that average? And I know that Katie mentioned at the top of the call, the ACCP Insights, CSR Insights survey results coming out. So there really is a need to understand what's good, what's bad, what's average, what's the impact, why does it matter? So on the next 2 slides, I'm going to show you 2 versions of example presentations. These slides were designed to kind of mimic what you might show in an actual presentation to your executive leadership team. There isn't one right way to present to leadership. It will often depend on how mature your data might be, your programming, and of course, the specific preferences of leaders. So take this as a starting point and feel free to kind of like riff and iterate on it based on what you know about your executive leadership team. Okay, here is my first example. So this is one that is light on data, i.e. no data. We love data, but you can sometimes get so caught up that you get a lot of text on a slide and you want to try to keep it to the learnings. You want to try to keep it to the so what. This version is also really useful if your data isn't fully maybe baked or validated yet. Maybe you're a brand new program and you have 1 year of data. And so this can help you create what you believe to be causation, right? And you can also use this slide if you want to keep things kind of clean and focused on your narrative. You can have that supporting data in your back pocket or looped into your talk tracks so that if questions arise, you have it readily available. You're just not cluttering the slide with it. So this example, it's going to lead with insights that model how to translate the CSR data into leadership language. It reduces text density, as we've discussed. It makes the business takeaway easier to absorb, and it surfaces a recommendation, not just an observation. So you'll see here on this slide that the context is what we lead with. So repeat participation was strong across volunteering programs, especially in team-based activities. What was the business implication? Employees who volunteered repeatedly reported higher intent to stay scores than non-participants across multiple business units. And then lastly, recommendation. What do we want to do about that? Well, we want to expand repeat and team-based volunteering in employee groups where retention is a priority. And we are going to partner with HR to continue to validate this trend further. At the bottom, you have your big light bulb moment. volunteering may be a practical lever to support retention strategy. And then the next version, you'll see has a little bit more data baked into it. This shift in approach is if you have stronger data or maybe a kind of longer running program, or you want to build deeper credibility with your leadership team. You can build the data directly into the slide. So I've essentially taken the previous slide and I've baked in some of the numbers that support the trends in which you are lifting up to your leadership team. The data adds confidence and weight. It shows patterns of consistency and it carries it throughout the big headlines. And then it can help your executives feel even more comfortable in taking action or approving next steps. This version is more scalable potentially, and it is definitely impactful if you are trying to influence some type of a decision or even an investment. So the bottom line here is that no matter which version you use, the most important shift is this. You're not leading just with activity. You're taking that activity and you're leading with an outcome and what it means for your business and the bottom line. Okay, so key takeaways. We're going to wrap with a few key takeaways and simple steps that you can apply right now. First, the connection between volunteering and workforce outcomes, it's already there. Volunteering creates connection and purpose, and it drives engagement. It ultimately supports things like retention and performance, and that's what your leaders care about. The challenge isn't proving that it matters, it's highlighting it in a way that your organization understands and trusts. Second, we talked about the proof ladder framework. This is a great way to shift your headspace from moving from activity to experience to workforce signals and ultimately business outcomes. You can determine where you're currently sitting on that ladder, decide if you want to move one rung up, and if that's the case, you can then move into measurement mapping as a way to align with your HR team to prove impact and make connections for your leaders. So you don't need to do this alone. You don't need to build something entirely new. The most effective approach will be partnering with your HR teams, using the metrics they already track, and baking that in and connecting it to your volunteering data. Finally, how you communicate all of this matters just as much as what you measure. Shift from reporting activity to telling a story about outcomes is what helps your leaders see volunteering as a business lever, not just a feel-good program. So if you're thinking about what to do next, I'd keep it really simple. Start by choosing one priority outcome or something that feels like it is really being impacted significantly by volunteerism. So retention, engagement, or belonging. So it sounds like there was a really big portion of us based on the poll results who are still kind of sitting in that activity readout rung of the proof ladder framework. And you may want to move one rung up to employee experience and the signals that you're getting. And in that, you may say, I've kind of seen that we'll do a volunteer campaign for a month, and we get a lot of really positive feedback from our employees about how they really love working for a company that prioritizes volunteer time and effort. That could connect back really well to engagement trends, right? From there, you'll then want to align to one metric that already exists. Maybe that is an engagement style question within your engagement survey, or explore with HR other things that they're tracking that may provide you data on that side around engagement. And then know that you don't need perfect data to get started. Progress here is iterative. You don't have to, you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to track everything at once. It can be as simple as, we just want to have an idea of, does this volunteer campaign where we're getting positive feedback about employees feeling engaged impact those employees and staying? And then from there, it's getting the data from your side, which you own and you have, connecting it with the data that HR owns and has, and cross-referencing between the two to see if you can pull out trends that could give you kind of directional impact to share with your leadership team. At the end of the day, proving value isn't about doing more measuring per se. It's about being more exact and targeted with what you're measuring and connecting it to things that you know your leadership team cares about. With that, I'm going to see if we have any questions. And I think Katie is my Sherpa, my
You
Q&A
got it.
Sherpa.
Kate, thank you. This is a
Welcome.
topic I am super passionate about, and you walked us through so many great ideas and suggestions. I want to invite folks to plug their questions into the Q&A feature or into the chat. But selfishly, I would love to get us started.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
you were just sharing on that last slide that pick one priority to start with,
Yeah.
right? How do you recommend choosing between engagement, retention, or some third or fourth thing if
Yep.
you are just dipping your toe in this space, which we know quite a few of our listeners today are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would approach this into one of two ways. The first way would be to get a sense of what your leadership team is already paying attention to right now, right? What's keeping them up at night? Is it attrition? Is it new hires? They want new hires to really dive into culture from the start. Those things are going to give you an idea of where you can align your measurement mapping and your reporting activities and making those connections. And the second one is where you have the most accessible data, right? Like let's not make this harder than it has to be. Don't put your sights on something where you're going to have to build this huge thing that doesn't exist, right? So where do you, as a volunteering CSR giving team, have the most accessible data on your side? And also collectively looking at HR. Maybe engagement survey isn't something that your team's currently running. So maybe we don't want to focus on intent to stay because you don't have that data yet. So it's going to be nuanced and you're going to have to be nimble. But if I know anything about CSR teams, is that we know how to be nimble and we know how to create amazing things with lack of resources. And so my advice is pick the outcome that's strategically relevant to you and your leadership, but also realistically measurable at the same time. You can always build and iterate from there. The hope is that as you continue to get more successful in this practice, you're getting more resources to
Hmm.
help in these efforts as time goes on.
Becomes a virtuous cycle. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Great. We've got a question from Julie. She
Okay.
wonders, how do you suggest controlling for other drivers of engagement, retention factors, things like pay, promotion, or the manager relationship, or the ability to work
Hmm.
remotely? How do you control for those things as you're trying to prove this connection?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Julie. And, think that what initially comes to mind and what is super critical to this dynamic is your partnership with HR, right? Because they're the experts. You're the expert on volunteerism. You're the expert on giving. You're the expert on CSR. You have to have that connection with someone on the HR side of the house that can speak to things like manager relationships, pay, what's happening in the market, right? What's happening in your industry, in the market? How are those HR professionals tracking kind of overarching trends that could be having an impact on your side of the house as well? So that is critical. To be quite honest with you, I'm not really sure how far you're going to be able to get on your own without a friend in HR that is willing to collaborate with you. And like I said, they're very busy. So maybe it just looks like a quarterly connect, an hour on the calendar with someone who's willing to sit with you and you're able to say, hey, what are you seeing? This is what we're seeing, and see what sparks from those ongoing connections that could kick you off in the direction of moving through some of the activities that we discussed today.
And I think too, it helps when they can begin to see the way that a partnership with all of you benefits their work and their data
Truly.
and their storytelling for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. We've got another question. Someone who's asking about what type of metrics you would recommend assessing with HR to be able to prove that skills and talent development value of
Yeah.
employee volunteering.
Yeah, skills volunteering. It was definitely something as I was working through some of that foundational research, the Deloitte survey, the Gallup feedback. That is a really important and critical kind of part of this, the skills progression and piece. And I am riffing off the top of my head, but I do believe that there was a study completed by, I believe, Taproot that kind of dives specifically into like this skills component. So just a quick plug, if you want to, if you guys want to Google and get into that, that kind of speaks to the importance of volunteering, connecting skills-based volunteering, connecting back to skills progression, and then of course that brings all the feel-good feelings, I think, when you're an employee. So in terms of metrics, I can't speak to how detailed everyone's engagement surveys are, but I think we can all agree we've taken one or two in our lifetimes. I can assure you that if your company has structured engagement surveys, that there are questions that are specifically targeted, right, to that component, feeling like there's evolution and growth within skills. Now, will those maybe directly at this time connect fully back to skills-based volunteering or volunteering in general? Maybe not. But that could be a really great launching pad for you to iterate with HR to say, maybe we're not ready now, but would you guys be open to baking in a question in the future so that we can start to make those connections maybe next year, the following year? So a little bit of a long game, but it's definitely doable.
Yeah. Well, we've got someone in the chat who's also highlighting things like visibility, brand awareness, market share growth, customer growth, other things that can potentially be connected to volunteerism and the type of reputation and visibility that it builds as well. So there's a
Yes.
whole set of layers to that.
There definitely is. There definitely is. And obviously, it's I think a good way to think about it is internal and external, right? What's the internal goodwill? What's the external goodwill? And today was more focused on internal, but that can lead to external goodwill, right? I think we all have stories of maybe enjoying a coffee with a friend and saying, "Oh yeah, I went to this really cool volunteering event last week where I helped at an urban farm and it was so great." And then your friend's like, "Wait, you got to like take time off of work during the workday and go do this like for your company?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, you work for X, Y, okay." And then they're off having wine with another friend later that night. And they say, "Did you know that so and so gets time off of work to go do this? Did you know they're doing this in the community?" So while today is focused on specifically on the external piece, and that is a huge piece of it, don't count out how word of mouth, personal stories and anecdotes that are shared um, from the employee volunteering perspective do make their ways. They make it makes their way out into the ether.
Yeah.
But I think that if I were kind of going to start the conversation on the external piece beyond that, I think it looks like partnering with marketing, which really just those cross collaborations are
Mhm.
important to being able to fully understand the pulse of how volunteerism is just spreading internally and externally.
Well, Kate, thank you. Thank you for those
Yeah,
insights, those
of course.
answers. We all clearly know that employee volunteering has an impact on the business, and the ability to prove it is the struggle. But you've given us all a lot of really good ideas about where to get started. So thank you. All of
You're
you for
welcome.
joining us today. Thank you. We would really love your feedback. So if you would Click the link in the chat or scan the QR code on the screen and take a couple of minutes to respond to our 4-question survey. We would love to hear your thoughts. And we hope we'll see you again, either at another CSR Marketplace virtual session or another one of ACCP's upcoming events. Thanks again, Kate, and thanks
Of
everyone.
course. Thank you,
Take
everyone.
care.
All right. Bye-bye.